American Cemetery. The Lake County Sheriff's Office was called to investigate, and they obtained DNA. And they obtained DNA specifically from a cigar. And we're going to explain that in greater detail in just a minute. So when the DNA came back, they ran it through CODIS, and it led them to Brian Tolentino. Brian Tolentino is 43 years of age, and he drives a truck for a living. Well, upon investigation, Brian Tolentino led them to Juan Lopez. Juan Lopez is 29 years of age, and he owns the Bushkan Karate Center and after-school child care program on Dundee Road in the area of Winter Haven. So they were working this robbery of a grave, and subsequent to figuring out that Brian lived in Davenport and Juan lived in the Lake Wales area, we were led to an address of 5170 Timber Lane Drive in Lake Wales. We served a search warrant there at a house. We served lots of search warrants. But for the first time that I'm aware of, what we found was a Palo Mayombe shrine. When we arrived there with our search warrant and went into the room, we found this very ornate shrine, and you can see the pictures of it there. There were 7 skulls in this, if you will, shrine. Of the 7 skulls, we determined 5 of them were human skulls. 2 of them were plaster replicas. Now keep in mind, when the graves were robbed, there were 4 graves that were robbed. There were 4 skulls taken. We still have not identified, and the Lake County Sheriff's Office, and we're assisting them, is working to try to identify where the 5th skull came from. In addition to that, we found an alligator head, a baby alligator that was deceased. We found goat heads, goat skulls, chicken bones, raccoon skulls, and many other different artifacts, religious artifacts. So we got to researching. We talked to Juan and Brian, and they both confessed. And I'll tell you what they did in just a second. But our research shows us that the Palo Mayombe religion is a religion that's solitary, a solitary religion with no house of worship. Our research further told us that this is a black magic art that needs body parts in order to worship, and they prefer to have skulls. Palo Mayombe is reported to be the evil twin sister of the Santeria religion. So when Brian and Juan confessed, here's what they told us. They said that the spirits had led them to the cemetery. And once the spirits led them to the cemetery, there is an interesting thing that occurs. We said, well, how did you end up with those graves? And they said, well, the spirits led us to those graves. But before they could remove the skulls and the body parts from the grave, they had to perform a ritual, a ceremony. And they did. They would drink Bacardi rum and spit it out on the ground. And then they would smoke a cigar and exhale the smoke. And the purpose of that was to protect them from the spirits. And then they broke open these graves. Once they broke open the graves, they started to remove the remains. When they would remove the skulls and the remains, then they would put orange peels back in the cemetery. And the reason they did that was so that the spirits would not leave the skull and go back into the grave. So that was to prevent the spirits from leaving the skull. They said it was their preference that they have the graves of heroes. And that's exactly what the spirits led them to. And when asked about why a hero's grave, they said because the spirit is much stronger in a hero than it is a normal person. And also, when you have the skull of a hero, the spirit is not only stronger, but it can protect you from evil. So let me stop now that you know how they robbed the graves and the fact that they robbed the graves and the fact that they disturbed these heroes, to tell you that 3 of the 4 graves were veterans of the military. They, in fact, were heroes. One was Calvin McNair. He was born in 1935. He passed in 1992. He was a Marine. He was buried in his Marine dress blues. He was a police officer, and he was a police officer in Anasta, Connecticut. They took his skull. If that just doesn't make your blood boil, I don't know what does. A hero, a Marine who was laid to rest in his military blues, a police officer, someone who had served and protected, they took his skull. And then there was Elbert Carr. He was born in 1896, the same year my grandmother was, and he passed in 1988. Elbert was a sergeant in the Army, served during World War I. He was a hero. They took his skull. And then the third veteran was Henry Britton. He was 29 and he passed in 1983. He was an Army hero. He served in Korea. They took his skull. The fourth lady was not in the military. Annie Fennell, she was born in 1935 and passed in 1998. But she was a caretaker of seniors and those that were infirmed in life. She had a servant's heart. They took her skull, her arm, and her hand. As I said earlier, our 5th victim is unknown. So let me introduce you to the religious leader, Juan Lopez. I've already told you that he confessed. I've already told you that he runs an after-school daycare and a karate center. He has no criminal history. But Juan used to be also a police officer in Puerto Rico, and he said that he resigned because the agency was corrupt. But he's known, his religious leader title is known as Tata. His social media, where he brags or speaks of his religious dealings, he referred to cemeteries as holy sites and shopping centers. Did you hear what I just said? He considers the cemeteries shopping centers. We didn't say that. He did. He complained in the United States that it's difficult in getting human remains to practice his religion. Well, let me tell you, we don't have any skulls laying around in the county jail, and that's where he's going or that's where he is, if he hasn't made bond. And then there's Brian Tolentino. He is a practitioner, and he's known as Poleros. He's the one that used the large bar to break open the cemeteries after Juan the Tata performed the religious ceremony at the gravesite late at night or early in the morning in the darkness of December the 5th or 6th. But unlike the Tata, the Poleros has a criminal history for bank robbery when he was in Puerto Rico. He also had cocaine charges and grand theft charges out of Orange County, Orlando. It probably should come as no surprise to you. They dropped those charges. But he robbed graves. Any grave is horrific. But they sought out and intentionally went to the graves of veterans, of heroes, of war heroes that fought for this great country we have today. The investigation's still underway. Obviously, Lake County Sheriff's Office is leading this investigation. We are assisting them, but it's never okay to violate the law in order to practice any religion. And they clearly violated several laws in the state of Florida. Are there any questions?
Have you gotten reaction, or has the Lake County Sheriff's Office gotten reaction from the families of the deceased?
The Lake County Sheriff's Office has been in contact with the families, as I understand, and they are certainly very, very happy that the investigation took them to this point. And once the investigation's over with, the medical examiner obviously will return the remains so that they can be reinterred with the family. Orange peel or no orange peel. Spirits or no spirits.
Excuse me, Sheriff. Are there any other people as part of this religion who may have taken part in this, and are you anticipating more arrests?
There is no one else that we're aware of. Only the two of them were led by the spirits that night to that cemetery, according to them. Now, I can't tell you who all may have worshiped with these different shrines or at this particular shrine with this, but as you can see, it's rather elaborate. And what they will do is people who are worshiping will cut themselves, and then they will drip the blood over these individual containers. And they also have this little disc that while they're performing this religious ceremony, they're not only drip the blood over the disc, over this, but on the disc as well, I understand, and they keep that. I'm not a religious expert in this religion, but I can tell you that it rips my heart out to think that the graves of these veterans, these heroes, were disturbed for the purposes of creating the Palo Shrine.
Sheriff, can you speak to how traumatizing this is for the families? I mean, it's been a month the souls were missing.
I cannot even tell you how traumatizing it is for the family. We see grave robberies periodically, and nothing's ever the same for the family after that. Most of the times, we never find the remains so we can return them. The blessing is because of the great work by the detectives for the Lake County Sheriff's Office, they completely did their crime scene work and were able to get DNA, and that led us to Brian, actually. Led us to Brian because he was the one with a criminal record, and Brian led us to the religious or spiritual leader, Juan. But once again, that's how great DNA is, and that's what happens when you have a criminal record of bank robbery. We keep your DNA hanging around for a while.
Is there any evidence that they may have struck any
Yes, because we have one unidentified skull or body part at this time, so we know of at least one other. I don't know, because I don't understand the depth of this religion at all, whether or not at some point in time they discard the skulls or if they keep them in perpetuity for religious purposes. But obviously he complained about, one, it's very hard to get them in the United States, and two, cemeteries are shopping centers. Did you hear that? Juan said on a YouTube video that cemeteries were holy sites and a shopping center. Well, let's call the county jail the checkout line to the shopping center.
We know one person, at least one person in Tampa Bay, whose loved one's skull is missing from their gravesite. What, should people reach out to the police?
Lake County Sheriff's Office will be working with the medical examiner's office. They will take DNA from that skull, and then they'll take DNA from family members, and they'll make attempts to match it.
So they can come forward.
Absolutely, they need to come forward, because we want to, one of the most sacred things we can do is to respect our loved ones that have passed on, and to make sure that they're safe and secure as their body is interred in the grave. And so the good news is we can reinter the complete graves of 4, and we want to for the 5th as soon as we find out who they are. The bad news is they should have never been disturbed to begin with. Look at this. Look at this mess that they left at people's gravesite. This is despicable. You can't condemn this in tough enough words. Setting the religious views aside, because I'm not going to attack anyone's religion, their conduct here is reprehensible in the strongest terms. Any questions? Any more questions? Thank you very much. Y'all have a good weekend, and we'll see you when the next set of criminals do something just really, really stupid. Take care.
Sheriff, do you have access to that YouTube video that you could send to us?
The link is in the news release.
We'll get it for you.
It's also electronically sent, so you can just click the link.
All right. Thank you all very much.